Alrighty, welcome back to Shut Up and Ball. I am Aaron, accompanied by Mr. John Harris, as always. And we're back to react to week 17. I want to make sure I have that correct. Week 17 of the 2022-2023 NFL season. And it was a very newsworthy week, as obviously, you know, the Monday night thing happened with, you know, Damar Hamlin. And I do want to ask this. I think it'd be good to share, you know, like, where were you at? Because I was just, you know, not sure if you want to, John, but yeah, I was just sitting there watching the game as usual on my phone. Usually I watch it without sound too, because I'm doing other stuff, cooking or, you know, watching TV or hanging out with my girlfriend. And yeah, so I saw the play live, and I'll admit, didn't notice that he fell, obviously, in real time. It wasn't until, you know, they mentioned it. But yeah, it was, especially when they mentioned it wasn't a concussion or a head related, very scary, to say the least. Nonetheless, yeah, I feel bad if I don't have much else to add outside my perspective, you know, which is obviously sympathetic. Shout out to all the people that have donated to his foundation. I think I saw, was it over 4 million as of today?
Yep.
For a toy drive he does for his hometown. But anyhow, so that's where I was, and that's how I felt in the moment. Obvious shock and awe. Good call by the coaches and the players. Basically, it was them that basically made the decision for the NFL, it seemed like. But anyhow, sorry. John, any, I guess, perspective or thoughts, reactions you want to share before we dive into the football?
I actually wasn't really watching the game. It was on. I was at my parents' house with my family before my siblings headed out of town. So I wasn't like paying attention to the game, but I walked over to the TV room, saw it was paused. Initially didn't think anything of it because I didn't see the hit. I didn't see anything. I just saw players down on the field. I wasn't like listening to the broadcast or anything. So I just thought, you know, momentary pause. Came back about 10 minutes later. He's still down. Both teams had completely surrounded the middle of the field. And just the responses of some of the Bills players instantly made me think, okay, Gordon Hayward, when he got hurt for the Celtics, Christian Eriksen, if anyone's familiar with soccer, 2 years ago, had a similar situation where he also went into cardiac arrest. And just both situations, the visible response of teammates was kind of what made me instantly think of that, because you see a lot of people crying, you see a lot of people praying, just a lot of concern. It feels like all of a sudden the entire sports world has paused because of this moment. Unlike those two other situations, the game did get canceled. I think, unlike the other two situations, though, in both of those ones, we knew that the person was stable, they were alive, they were going to be okay. In this, there was never, even to this day, he's still in critical condition as of Wednesday recording. But there has been, you know, positive signs reportedly, but he is still in critical condition. And so, yeah, I do want to give a shout out to, I think it was Zach Taylor, who, from what I've heard, which the NFL disputed this, but Joe Buck said it on the air multiple times, and I don't know why he would say that unless somebody told him to. But he said that the NFL told them 5-minute warm up and then we're going to restart the game after the ambulance had left the field. I think it was Zach Taylor who walked across to the other sideline and met with Sean McDermott. And apparently McDermott was saying, I need to be at the hospital. And both coaches then agreed, yeah, we don't need to be playing this game. This is more important right now. So I want to give a shout out to the coaches because I think they handled that well. Because like I said, unlike those other situations, and honestly, any injury in any sport I can think of, there was just no knowledge of if the player was going to be okay, right? Like when the guy's getting carted off and he throws the thumbs up, or, you know, like they're at least conscious, they're whatever, they're stable. There's a report that they're at the hospital stabilized, they're breathing on their own, something like that. None of that had happened. And so there was just, I mean, there honestly, like there was worry that he might die. I'm not a medical professional, but that's what I was thinking, and I'm sure that some of those teammates on the field were thinking that as well. And so, yeah, that was kind of a long-winded answer, but shout out to coaches for making that decision. Shout out to Adam Schefter, Booger McFarland, and I can't remember who the woman was that was also on the broadcast team, but they threw the camera on them for quite a bit of time, and they had to. It was kind of an impossible situation that they were put in. I thought they handled it well. Was a really big fan of Ryan Clark and Scott Van Pelt afterwards. Ryan Clark just handled it excellently. So I don't know, just a very, very tough situation that no one was wanting, and I just think a lot of people involved handled it really well.
Yeah, so obviously game would not be is not also going to be, as of right now, been rescheduled, not going to be played, or not going to be bumped or anything. As of right now, postponed. So honestly, I don't think they should even play it. Just I think, and this was a thing that they brought up on Pro Football Talk, is just this little rule is that we can go off win percentages, because that's what the NFL said that they were ready to do. Remember back in the COVID, when COVID was, that was happening, because remember we had a bunch of reschedules there, but obviously this is a completely different situation. But that's what I would assume. That's what I would push for if I was the NFL, if I was making these decisions, but I'm not. And honestly, like, I heard this on a bun on the way home too. They mentioned there too, like, in regards to the players, like, and the situation, because if the game doesn't get counted for the Bills and Bengals, the Chiefs would be the 1 seed unless they lose next week. But if the Chiefs win next week, then they're gonna get the 1 seed, probably off point percentage. Like, Bills have beaten them there twice, and we know that Cincinnati's literally beating the Chiefs 3 straight times. So I don't think those players, especially with what happened in regards to the Bills and Bengals, don't think they would mind losing the 1 seed, because I mean, regardless, both those teams, especially the Bills, Bills have a lot that they're playing for, so I'm sure that they don't mind not going back to that game. So, but because they're very obviously wanting to move on from it the other night. But anyhow, that's all we got so far in regards to that game and that news. So that'll make next week interesting, to say the least, in terms of football. Anyhow, let us dive into week 17. Going to start from the very beginning. A game that kind of went to script, John, for your Cowboys, but nonetheless, it did go to script. I mean, okay performance by Joshua Dobbs, but kind of felt like your Cowboys really lost control of this game very much.
Yeah, I mean, with the amount of backups and stuff that were starting for the Titans, I mean, we both picked the Cowboys despite the large spread. So, we sort of expected this kind of a result. I felt like the score was closer than it should have been, honestly, because Dallas did make some pretty dumb mistakes. I mean, they lost a fumble. Dak lost a fumble. He threw 2 interceptions. And I will say, this is just a random thing. I'm getting really annoyed at how many, and this isn't on Dak. I mean, some of the interceptions are on Dak, obviously, but every week it seems like there's a receiver, somebody who is just tipping the ball up to the other team. And if you take a photo right when the ball arrives at them, you're like, oh yeah, easy catch. And then you hear that that's an interception. It's kind of absurd. And it's annoying too, because of course, like, the casual box score viewer is like, oh, Dak Prescott sucks, even though apparently he leads the entire NFL in turnovers that were not graded as a turnover worthy play. And so it shouldn't have been a turnover, but it was. That Noah Brown play, and then this week it was Peyton Hendershot, who had 5 yards of space between him and anybody, and then bobbled it 3 times, and then the other team grabs it. So, just hoping that, because that's just one of those mistakes too, that it's like, okay, even if you just drop it, like, that's a better scenario than tipping it up to the other team. Like, just these really dumb mistakes that it's like, guys, let's stop doing that. But yeah, overall, I don't really have much else to say about this game, because the Titans just didn't have a lot of talent playing out there.
Yeah, there wasn't much to be said else eyes. No Derrick Henry, and although at the time it seemed like Malik Willis was a starter, so it looks like they're just benching him, maybe keeping him healthy for Week 18. It's looking like as of right now, I think they've already named Joshua Dobbs to be their starter for Week 18. So they must have liked what they seen. He did come in that week basically, and barely had time to learn the playbook, but has had the extra 3 days and obviously a full game under his belt. So we'll see how that affects them going forward for Week 18, as this game for them, win or lose, didn't really matter. So hence why they benched a bunch of guys. But I don't have much else to add. You already mentioned turnovers could be an issue, but even like you said, a little unlucky. So hopefully, it's not an issue Week 18, obviously. So big win for the Johnson Cowboys as they beat the Tennessee Titans 27-13. Now we go to the Sunday games, starting with definitely a game that not many cared about unless you live in Arizona or Atlanta or are a fan of those teams, because it was a close game, but not much on the line here except draft positioning, as the Falcons, they beat the Cardinals 20-19. Desmond Ridder gets his first win as a starter. It seems like Tyler Algier is a player. Any thoughts on this game, John?
Not a ton, because, the Cardinals just dealing with all the stuff that they're dealing, and Atlanta kind of in a similar situation. Teams that have basically started to look towards next year. But yeah, Tyler Algier, shout out to the one commenter on our Falcons, or no, I think it was our running back draft video, who asked about Tyler Algier before the draft. And I don't know if he was just a fan of Algier in college or what, but he did ask about him, and I don't think I gave a very positive response. So Tyler Algier has proven me a little bit wrong so far. Regardless, yeah, I guess good for the Cardinals to cover, but overall, don't really have much to say about this game.
Yeah, I don't have much else to add. Arizona, let's see what happens. This offseason, especially with Cliff, and there's going to be no Kyler Murray next year, at least to start looking like he will not at least be starting Week 1 for the Cardinals. But yeah, Falcons, good positive win for Desmond Ridder and the gang. So now we go to the next game, which a little more intriguing, although mainly for Lions fans it was, as they take care of business against the Bears 41-10. Early on, though, seemed like it was going to be a close game, but just didn't really shake out that way. Detroit kind of dominated. What were your thoughts on the Lions keeping their playoff hopes alive?
Great win for Detroit. They needed this one very badly if they wanted to, like you said, keep their playoff hopes alive. And for Chicago, my worry came true. I think they're pretty much set on trying to secure as high a draft pick as possible, because this late in the year, what do you really have to play for? Also, like, Justin Fields is dealing with some minor injuries, so you just want to start to play it safe. And so I think that even their mentality going into this week was once Detroit really struck hot early, they maybe just kind of took their foot off the gas pedal and was like, you guys can have it. We'll put our hands up, throwing the towel kind of a mentality. So yeah, really impressive win for Detroit. I think the part that was the most impressive to me about this win for them was it felt very complete. Their defense showed up. They only allowed 10 points. Fields wasn't able to do much in terms of throwing the ball. Yes, he did run the ball well, but running quarterbacks are just kind of a different animal. So, and it was specifically Justin Fields, who might be arguably the best running quarterback in the league until we see Lamar finally back healthy. We'll see the debate start, but it's tough to contain him. But otherwise, after him, Khalil Herbert only had 31 rushing yards. Their leading receiver was Cole Kmet with 27 yards. So the Lions defense stepped up big time. And then offensively, they responded really well. They started off down 10-7, but then the next three quarters, defense did not allow a point. And the offense in the second quarter came up and put up 17 to go up 24-10 at halftime. Jared Goff did great. Jamal Williams dominated on the ground. DeAndre Swift had a really great day. It just felt like a very complete victory. The only person still left out seems to be Jameson Williams, who is apparently getting frustrated on social media. And every single week, the coaching staff says, we're going to get him more involved. And he still has 2 career catches through the 5 games that he's been back. But regardless, they got the win, and that's what matters.
He did get a carry for 40 yards. Excuse me. So, again, because of his injury, and how late it was last year, I mean, I'm sure they've told us, but, it's sometimes an issue with ACL injuries and stuff. Guy feels like he may be ready, but, Lions, they don't want to risk their potential franchise wide receiver that they invested a high pick on. So, and they got a pretty talented receiver room already. So, and DJ Chark's on a 1-year deal. So they're probably trying to maximize, because Jameson Williams will probably play more the DJ Chark role anyway when the time comes. So they're probably trying to maximize their investment in him. In regards to the game, yeah, you really hit it. Offensively, did whatever they wanted. They ran the ball too, effectively passed the ball. But it is also important to remember this Bears defense not very good. I mean, it's kind of been the theme ever since they let go of Roquan Smith, and I've lost a bunch of key guys like Eddie Jackson, and then you mentioned Bears. Yeah, might as well just pack it in. I'm not sure I'm a fan of that. They already kind of showed that cool tight end, the time when the tight end took the snap and pitched it back to Fields. Like, it's like, man, maybe you should have saved that for next year, because now teams are going to be expecting that, and you weren't. I don't know. Could have saved it.
Or maybe this is one of those moments like the Mahomes Tyreek Hill play in the Super Bowl, where they 4 years from now, when they're actually really good in a crucial moment, they call back to that one play in week 17 of 2022. And they're like, oh, yeah, you remember that play? And they're like, yeah. And then they do it.
I mean,
obviously
sure,
that's a reach, but maybe you never know.
But maybe we'll just give other teams something to think about. I don't know. It gives teams something to think about if they play the Bears. But regardless, I mean, yeah, we'll see what happens with the Bears. It's not shocking that the passing game didn't go well. That will be interesting to see if they can maybe get Justin Fields more help, and if he can, have better performances in the passing game, so we can get the full Justin Fields evaluation as a full quarterback. But yeah, like John mentioned, if not the best, one of the best just running quarterbacks in the league. So anyhow, credit the Lions for the win here. And I want to add, because we'll be talking about this in the previews later in the week, I don't like all the crazy stuff that the Lions do. I like it in terms of it's good, it works, but I hate it as a Packer fan playing them week 18. I just feel like we're going to see some crazy stuff. And I mean, they did that one Aiden Hutchinson thing where he was, kind of on the sideline. They also rushed no guys that play either. I don't like it, Jonathan. 2 weeks ago they were throwing to Penei Sewell. I don't like it. I just feel
they're getting
something
creative.
bad's gonna happen. That's why I don't like it. I feel like something bad's gonna happen, but at least for me. But great things happening for the Lions, as they do need some help because they lost against Carolina next week. They need some help that the Seahawks need to lose. But obviously, we'll talk more about that stuff either later in the pod or later in the week. Anyway, let's go to another blowout, and it was the Jacksonville Jaguars. The game was quote-unquote meaningless. Jacksonville still went out there and played their starters, at least for a bit, as they beat the Houston Texans 31-3. Anything to mention about this game? Kind of went as we thought it would.
I don't have much to say. Jacksonville handling their business. I thought they would rest starters. They did not. So they did what they needed to do. The worst case scenario truly would have been you go out there and you get embarrassed by Houston, because you want to build some momentum. It was a meaningless game regardless, but you want to build some momentum maybe going into the next week. And I think maybe that's why they didn't rest anybody. You can have a successful game. You can get in your rhythm. Hopefully carry that over the next week. And that's what they did. So congrats to Jacksonville.
Yep. Congrats to them. Taking care of business like any other good team would, and got their stars a little bit of rest, not the full rest. So anyhow, let's go over to an AFC West divisional matchup between the Chiefs and Broncos. Was a closer game this time, but the Chiefs did manage to pull away in this one and win 27-24. Any thoughts here in regards to the Chiefs taking care of business, but a little bit, too close for comfort?
Somehow the Broncos just apparently they can only really show up when it's against Kansas City. And by show up, I mean have their best offensive performances of the year, I guess. I don't know. I mean, Russell Wilson had 3 touchdowns. 2 of them were rushing, but he had 3 touchdowns. That's I think his two of his three best games on the year were against Kansas City, and the other one was like against the Raiders in like week 4, I think. But so yeah, I mean, I'm guessing maybe if you're a Broncos fan, the positive you can take away from this is, hey, like maybe we're not as bad as our record would indicate. Maybe you know, you're hoping that Hackett was all of the problems and that this is a sign that maybe next year things can be better. You're also hoping that this is a sign that Russell Wilson's not truly washed. For the Chiefs, you know, at this point in the year, I stopped looking at like how does the team win, and it's just do you win? Like, because when you're getting towards the end of the year and you're getting closer to playoffs, guys are tired. It's, you know, teams have figured you out in terms of film. Like, there's no new tricks that you're really going to bring out in week 17 unless you're, I guess, the Bears or the Lions. But for the most part, like, you're just playing your ball and then you're saving any little extra things you might have for like the playoffs, and you're just trying to get the results. So for the Chiefs, although it wasn't the most impressive of victories, you won, and that's all that matters.
Yeah. I do want to add maybe for the Chiefs, maybe a little bit why they sputtered this game. You know, getting a lot of guys back. Kadarius Toney got a lot of action, and like Sky Moore, you know, more involved, and MVS has been there, but you know, he dropped. He's good for a drop or two, always. So, and quiet, kind of a quiet game for Juju Smith-Schuster as well, but also let's remember Denver, very good defense still, especially passing wise. And yeah, in regards to the Broncos, performances like these are encouraging, especially by Russell Wilson. You see him willingly move. He may not move the same as he used to, but at least, you know, he's seeing the field much better, as there are times early in the year, and plenty of examples on, you know, Twitter and such, when, you know, he could have ran on this play, or, you know, tucked in and ran and he didn't. He did someone else, or, you know, missed the guy open. So yeah, we'll see what happens with Denver. As like John mentioned, no Nathaniel Hackett, so they're, and a good performance like this, maybe they can get a feel for who they want to go after in the head coaching search. But Chiefs take care of business. As John mentioned, that's all you can really do. So now we go to a pivotal matchup in the AFC East between the Patriots and Dolphins. Patriots win this one 23-21. No two of this game. Teddy Bridgewater, he also got hurt, and in came Skylar Thompson, and a loss that was not enough. Any thoughts here, John, in regards to the Patriots getting the big win?
Obviously, you know, we talked about a lot of the playoff tiebreakers and all that kind of stuff, and, you know, the scenarios, and this was a very crucial game. We thought that Miami would win. We thought that they would probably cover, and they did not. Or what, did they? Did they cover? No, they did not. They lost. Regardless, I mean, this is a big one for the Patriots because the Jets also losing. I don't know if I think the Jets are eliminated, right?
Yes, I'm pretty sure they are. I will double check right now.
And so I don't know New England's chances to make it because they still have to worry about Pittsburgh.
Jets are eliminated.
Jets are eliminated. And so I guess that means, yeah, they're worried about just the Steelers because I think everybody else is out.
Steelers and Dolphins.
And Dolphins, right, because they could lose. But I'm saying they now have the tiebreaker. So yes, regardless, this is big because this puts them over the Dolphins in terms of the current playoff seedings. And next week, this might be why I was kind of talking like this, the Dolphins are apparently going to be without Tua and possibly even Teddy Bridgewater against the Jets, who might want to play spoiler a little bit. So it could be tough sledding for the Dolphins. So yeah, I mean, this was a very big win for the Patriots because now they have a little bit of wiggle room where if they lose to Buffalo next week, they could still make it in.
Yeah, and gosh, that's what I want to hit is no matter how much, you know, there's frustration with Mac Jones and the passing offense, this and that. I mean, Patriots just find a way. Like, for all the criticism, and I know there have been those out there that say, oh, it was all Brady, it was all Tom. Like, no, it obviously wasn't all Tom. You don't win that many championships, especially in football, with just one guy alone. It takes, you know, a pretty good coaching staff and, you know, obviously team around him. And yeah, I mean, through Mac Jones, you know, first, you know, having an up and down year, especially a year, I would say not as good as we expected. But once again, caveat, dealing with a whole another level of an offensive coordinator, which what I mean by whole another level, not up, more as a downgrade. And still no great talent around him offensively outside really Ramondre Stevenson, and he started faltering at the end of the year. New England finds a way, and Mac Jones had a pretty solid game, put one together. Tyquan Thornton, we all kind of questioned that pick in the second round. I know I definitely did. He's looking like pretty solid. You just got to stay healthy. They're finding ways to utilize him. And, Hunter Henry, a guy they put good money in when they brought him, and why am I blanking on the other tight end?
Jonnu Smith.
Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith. Jonnu hasn't been as active in the passing game, but it seems like Hunter Henry, not the Hunter Henry as of when he was with the Chargers, but still playing like at a level a little bit below that. He's been pretty good for them. So, yeah, Miami, what a free fall. A little bit of just unfortunateness with injuries and tough part of the schedule. But, yeah, we'll see if Skylar Thompson can, because likely it's going to be Skylar Thompson, like you mentioned, because they did sign Mike Glennon to the team. So, a huge win for the Patriots. They just do Patriot things and are staying alive somehow within this playoff race. Now we move on to the New York Giants. They took care of business 38-10 against the Indianapolis Colts. Not really a contest here, John. Any thoughts in regards to this game?
As we talked about in the potential scenarios, if the Eagles were to lose, that would give Philly motivation this upcoming Week 18 against the Giants, and the Giants just needed to win one game and get in, and they needed to handle their business against the Colts, and that's what they did. They made sure that they did not put anything to chance. They have now clinched a playoff spot. They are in. I believe they're probably locked in at the 6th seed because they cannot jump Dallas for 5, or technically Philadelphia is still at play at 5, but they can't jump either of them. And I think they're above anybody else who would be fighting for that last spot. The Lions, the Packers. I don't know if anybody else is in the mix because I know Washington got eliminated.
Seahawks,
but they would be above them as well.
Yes,
so
correct.
They are pretty much locked in, which means next week they don't even need, they could just rest everybody and get ready for the playoffs. So good for the Giants. They have snapped, I think, a 6-year streak of missing the playoffs and having losing seasons
ever since the boat.
Yep, ever since
they went
the
on the
boat
boat
picture of Odell and Sterling Shepard and Saquon and all those guys. So yeah, they have snapped the streak. Brian Daboll, serious consideration for Coach of the Year, honestly, with the job that he has done. So shout out to him. I know there was also the little bit of controversy around Kayvon Thibodeau doing the Snow Angels right next to Nick Foles as he was hurt. For anyone complaining, based on my understanding, I don't think Kayvon Thibodeau actually ever looked over at Nick Foles and realized he was writhing on the ground in pain right next to him. He did do it for an absurdly long time. And so I guess you can criticize that it's a little bit in bad taste that like you get a sack and you're going to do Snow Angels forever. It just kind of just kept going and going and going. But that said, I don't know. I want to cut the guy some slack and say that he wasn't trying to be malicious and celebrate an injury.
But, and I agree with you everything with that part, but then the sleep thing on the sideline, like that, it's like, come on, that's I think that's where I would have beef with.
Yes, that part Kayvon. I thought was a little disrespectful. I did kind of
can't be rooting injuries.
Yeah,
like the guy's obviously injured at that point. You should know that.
My biggest thing, which I'm not a proponent of violence, but that said, this is football. It's a violent sport. I agree with Jeff Saturday. I was kind of disappointed that if you're like a Colts offensive lineman, like that's your quarterback. Like that's a thing, I remember this happened to Andy Dalton a couple of years ago with the Cowboys offensive line. I was very disappointed. I was like, La'el Collins was hurt by that point, but I was like, the one thing that I knew about La'el Collins was you are not going to mess with his quarterback. Like if you get up in his face, he'll take the flag. He'll do whatever he has to set the tone that you're not going to do that. And for the Colts offensive line, I don't know, maybe they're just so defeated by the year, or maybe they didn't realize the injury. I don't know what was happening, but they didn't make a big deal about it. They just kind of stood there and watched. So yeah, I agree with Jeff Saturday. I do think that his response once again was a little overboard. I thought both their responses were, because Jeff was, I can't remember everything he was calling him, but he was calling him disgusting and blah, 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 all these kind of things. And then Kayvon responded saying, "Who's Jeff Saturday? I don't even know who that is." the whole thing was kind of just kind of whack, but whatever.
Yeah. And in regards to the game, it was just like it's pretty much domination. Not much to add. My offensive ball of the week will be Mr. Daniel Jones. Been efficient with the ball. Made some plays with his legs. Definitely was the more I would say efficient. Yeah, was the most efficient ball carrier for the Giants. He's taking on that role, doing the dirty work as well. I know, obviously, credit Dayball and them, but they've lost wide receivers and such, and he still made it work with them as well. So, yeah, big. Listen, he's not Josh Allen like usually John tried to tell you, but he has gotten better, and it'd be interesting to see. I believe he's on that contract year, right? Because they declined his 5th-year option. So I'm very interested to see what price he will get, because I'm assuming they will extend him. But like how many years, all that stuff will be very interesting. Like how much do you pay for what? Probably at best you'd say the 14th, 12th best quarterback in the league. You know what I mean? Like
I don't think he's that good personally, but
I'm just saying like.
If that's what they view him as,
projecting a little bit like at his best, like usually you're going to get paid for,
I don't want to get into the whole argument because someone already commented on the thing saying like, "Are you going to apologize now to Daniel Jones?" And I responded with the statistics of like he's 39th in the league in big time throws, he's 39th in the league in average depth of target. Yeah, he's reduced the turnovers, but it's because he's not trying to push the ball down.
He's basically Alex Smith. Yeah, how much are you going to pay for?
He's attempting to become a game manager, which is fine. Like, yes. But I literally told people, I was like, listen, if the best case scenario that you're asking for is like a Ryan Tannehill, if that's really what you want, and I think Ryan Tannehill at his peak was better than Daniel Jones personally will ever be, but we'll see, because maybe if you get the perfect offense around him like Tannehill got, then we can see him actually flourish. But regardless, I don't know. I'm just personally a big believer in like after the quarterback gets signed is the hardest time to win a Super Bowl, and so signing one who's not actually like in the top 12 range. For me, once again, personally, some people might disagree. The stats disagree with you if you disagree with me. But regardless, if you're outside of that top 12 range and you're getting big money extensions, like I think that's going to be 5 years that you're going to look back and be like, I probably shouldn't have done that. But whatever, that's just me.
Yeah, and listen, I'm with you. That's just typically like I would imagine that's how he's good. He would probably get paid in more like top 10, top 5 in terms of annually. Who knows?
Well, maybe. I don't know. I feel, here's the thing, though, that makes me hesitant that they would pay him big money is it's a new GM who didn't draft him, and it's a new coach, Brian Daboll, who had Josh Allen. And I hope that Brian Daboll is smart enough to realize, like, okay, I can get a lot out of Daniel Jones, but this guy's not Josh Allen, and I don't want to pay him like Josh Allen. So I think I could see him getting like $30 million because the current market, you're getting 45 if you're the top guy. But that's just me. I don't know. We'll see. The NFL is a wild sport, and we've seen.
And I guess we'll have to see what happens in the playoffs. Yeah, because like if Daniel Jones has like a good game or two in the playoffs, then then I'm not saying, but they might be inclined to, because it's always that last flavor, that last.
The
like,
playoffs.
What did you do recently?
Could shift everything dramatically. If he has a good performance, even if they lose and he has a really good performance, he can get a lot of money. And if he collapses, that could be tough.
Yeah. So who knows? But he's my ball of the week. He scored 4 touchdowns. That's hard to ignore. So maybe, who knows? Maybe he can pull a Joe Flacco ball in the playoffs and get paid. Anyhow, let's move on to the next game here. And that was between the Philadelphia Eagles and the New Orleans Saints. New Orleans pulls off a little bit of an upset here. They didn't really have much to play for. Or I forget, were they already eliminated before this game? Regardless, they're not in the race anymore.
They were still in it,
so
because
they're still in it. Okay, but they needed teams to lose. A lot of teams to lose.
I can't remember what time slot, but I'm pretty sure the Tampa Carolina game was happening as it was happening, and so if Carolina had won, that would have kept the Saints alive, because then the next week
they would have to beat Carolina.
They would have to beat Carolina and have Tampa Bay lose again, and then they would have made it.
Understood.
But
they did have something to play for, but they win here 20-10, John. I'll let you take the floor. Eagles take a huge L here. Your thoughts?
Great game for me, because I'm still hoping that the Cowboys can win this division and get the first seed, and this makes it possible. We're going to talk about another game later that makes it a little less possible to get the first seed at least, but this kept Dallas alive at least, because if Philadelphia won this game, Dallas would be locked in at 5. So this opens the scenario that they could still win the division if Philly was to lose the next week as well. But for the Saints, unfortunately, although as they were playing, they did have something to play for later. We'll talk about Tampa. Tampa did win, so the Saints are eliminated. But I still appreciate them getting the win. And I don't know, maybe Dennis Allen. I've heard rumors that they might try and fire him immediately. So maybe this little late year surge they kind of had a little bit might save his job. But overall, just shout out to the Saints defense, because that's what won them the game. Cameron Jordan, my baller of the week on defense, 3 sacks, forced a fumble. I also wanted to include Marshawn Lattimore, but I'm only picking Cameron Jordan. But Marshawn Lattimore had an interception for a touchdown as well. So yeah, just the Saints defense really balled out in this one. Gardner Minshew didn't have the greatest of days. But to anybody, and I'm saying this because I already had a coworker bring this up, to anybody who is saying that Gardner Minshew lost them this game, come on. Like, the guy still had almost 300 passing yards. He had a passing touchdown. Yes, he did have the pick 6. But like, he still did what he needed to do. To me, I'm just wondering why they didn't run the ball more. Like, Miles Sanders only had 12 carries. He was averaging 5 yards a carry. I don't know. To me, I thought that Gardner Minshew did enough to win the game. It didn't go their way.
Yeah, that's a big thing that was a little bit shocking to me, was that A, they ran the ball well, and B, they weren't patient with it, especially with their backup quarterback. So yeah, maybe got a little too pass happy, I don't know.
And I will say too, just by the way, if Jalen Hurts was healthy, I probably think they win this game, because he's really good at not throwing turnovers. So I don't think he throws a pick 6, and also he can dictate the run game more even when they pass, because he can just take off. So I just wanted to clear that up.
Yeah, and literally they would probably call 10 runs on their own for him anyway. So that's just 10 more carries, at least 10 for, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that was a little bit disappointing, because, play to your strengths. You have a backup quarterback, you have a backup tackle, kind of lean on the run game. And, this isn't a very good Saints offense. You don't need to, come out throwing fireworks and such. This is a Saints offense that struggles on the other side. But credit to the Saints and the offense. Kind of playing, it obviously is not the Sean Payton explosive offense, but kind of playing complementary to Zach Allen. He was their defensive coordinator, so playing to the defense. Let's just Andy Dalton be really efficient, 18 for 22. I know he had an interception, but kind of play ball control. They ran the ball obviously well. They've gotten Taysom Hill more involved. Doesn't always have to be amazing trickery, but just getting him touches seems to make plays. Also call a couple of passes for him too, so that was nice to see. So yeah, maybe, like I said, maybe this is enough for Zach Allen to save his job. Or at least give them another year, to think about it, because hey, you're probably arguing, hey, dealing with the quarterback, not controversy, but had to make decisions between the Jameis, didn't work out, made this move to Dalton. And they're almost there at the playoffs, knocking on the door. So we'll see if that helps them in the long run. Maybe finish off the season strong with a couple of wins here. We'll do so. But critical loss for Philadelphia, as I think they still control their own destiny, right? If they win, they still hold the 1 seed next week.
Yes, if they win next week, they will have the best record in the NFC, because they are the only NFC team with still only 3 losses. Just right behind them is Dallas with 4, San Francisco with 4, Minnesota with 4. They hold the tiebreaker over Minnesota, but they do not hold it over San Francisco and Dallas. So if they win, guaranteed 1 seed. If they lose, things could get a little crazy.
All righty. So we will see about that. But now we move on to another NFC South matchup here. And this is between the Bucks and Panthers. This is a big one, as we mentioned. And the Bucks, John, they came alive this one. Definitely Tom Brady and Mike Evans. Tom Brady must have found his fountain of youth again and gave Mike Evans a splash, because Mike Evans balled out as well. They beat the Panthers 30-24. Another fourth quarter comeback for the Bucks. and they stay alive, and they're going to the playoffs. Any thoughts on what happened here?
Well, the interesting part about this game was both teams' run defenses were amazing. Like, I don't think either team ran for over 100 rushing yards. They're both struggling. Like Leonard Fournette and Rachaad White both average under 3 yards a carry. So did Donta Foreman. Chuba Hubbard was the best of them with 3 carries for 12 yards in terms of average. So both teams were just shutting down the run. But neither team could stop the pass. Tom Brady, my offensive baller of the week for Tampa, a must-win game because things could have got wild next week with Carolina versus the Saints. The winner could potentially, take that spot from Tampa Bay if things went, certain ways. So Tampa Bay handled their business. They clinched the division. Tom Brady, 34 for 45, 432 yards, 3 touchdowns. And like I said, I always find it really impressive when a quarterback can ball out with 0 run game. And so that's exactly what he did, especially against some good corners too, like J.C. Horn in that secondary. So really impressed with the Buccaneers offense. For Carolina, I mean, shout out to Sam Darnold. I'm a big Sam Darnold critic. 341 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. He did throw an interception, but he had a really strong day. And it felt like, if there's anybody to blame for this loss, it's not Sam Darnold. It's not DJ Moore either, because he also balled out. But those 2 guys really showed up when they needed to, and it just, unfortunately for Carolina, wasn't enough. And so they are now eliminated from the playoffs at 6-10. There is always that sort of weird spot where it's like, do you want to go into the playoffs with a losing record? So at least for Carolina, you don't have to go in there and kind of be outmatched against a lot of the teams. Obviously, you have that dream scenario that maybe your team figures it out, but now that you have at least higher draft position and can hopefully upgrade your team.
By the way, I think Jason Horn's out, but I know what you mean. They still have CJ Henderson, still have Donta Jackson, still 2 good corners. But I just know that there's going to be that one person from Carolina that says J.C. Horn wasn't playing. Anyway, I don't have much else to add. I mean, I can't really blame the Bucks for, gosh, let me just put it this way. They haven't looked very impressive, but they are still very scary. I just feel like they're going to be a very scary matchup in the playoffs. I wouldn't be shocked if they win a couple or, heck, somehow make the whole enchilada, because it ain't pretty, but they're getting it done. And like you kind of already alluded to, just at critical moments, at critical times, love him or hate him, Tom Brady usually, for the most part, will come through. And nice to see Chris Godwin heavily involved too. Just nice to see their studs being studs. And, although the run game didn't really go well, a little concerned about the secondary because, you already kind of mentioned Sam Darnold had a really good game against them. So Todd Bowles got some things to adjust on his defense, and definitely will need to do so against better teams that aren't below 500 in the playoffs. But hey, all you got to do is get in the dance, and they've done that. So Bucks, they clinched their playoff berth. So yes, we'll see more of Tom Brady this January. But now we go over to one of the shocking results of the week, and it was the Browns handing the Washington Commanders a huge loss, 24-10. It was supposed to be Carson Wentz's shining moment, a redemption from last year when he blew Indianapolis's chances against Jacksonville. This was his moment to take command, no pun intended, of his destiny. Didn't happen, John. Did not have a great game, to say the least. Any thoughts here in regards to the Browns getting the win over the Commanders?
Yeah, tough result for Carson Wentz. Obviously, that's kind of the story here because you're going against Deshaun Watson on the other side, who didn't really have like the greatest of performances, only 169 passing yards, only completed 9 passes, but he threw 3 touchdowns. And on the other side, you got Carson Wentz with less passing yards on way more attempts and more completions, but he threw 3 interceptions. And yeah, for Washington, it's a tough way to go. I remember you were criticizing the fact that they were turning to Wentz despite Heineke not really doing anything to necessarily lose the job. I kind of agree. I thought that Heineke just, I don't know, there was a different level of motivation with this team. And for Wentz, it feels like just the way that his career has kind of gone the last couple of years, there's this sort of walking on eggshells of, if he has a bad game, we could see the end of Carson Wentz, at least in terms of him being a starter in the league. And Heineke, it feels like you're just playing with house money. Everybody knows, like, oh, he's a backup, and there's not really a bar for expectations, and so anything from there is kind of up. And so I don't know. I just think it's not a great look for Carson Wentz, but I do think the coaching staff deserves quite a bit of blame. And honestly, at this point, I wouldn't really be surprised if Ron Rivera was to get the boot after the year. We'll see with the way the ownership stuff is going, because obviously there's just a lot there, and Ron Rivera is kind of a stabilizing force. But that said, the Washington Commanders have just not really been super impressive during his tenure there, and this might be icing on the cake.
Yeah, I would agree. And yeah, at least completely. I mean, with everything you said. Yeah, I mean, I'll preface this. I was a Wentz believer, especially in Philly. And it's unfortunate that he got injured on that Super Bowl run, because I still truly believe, if A, he should have been MVP that season, and B, that they still would have won the Super Bowl. I wonder if, the fact that, he wasn't there, Nick Foles was the hero per se, if that is what but his influences poor decision making, because that season was like a perfect blend of his reckless, like he was playing at like the Josh Allen level that we see, where like it's reckless, like he'll throw a dumb interception here now and then, or do a weird play that had no business, but he would also make a lot of plays and make a lot of smart plays, and would hit everything else. But yeah, so I wonder if that's a little bit of a ghost he's been chasing, and that's why he just hasn't ever been able to find the right dial in terms of dialing it back, his recklessness. But yeah, I personally think he may have to go the Geno Smith route. He may, if he has any chance of probably starting again, because I just don't like, how can you trust your starter not to turn over the ball? And critical games here, 3 interceptions, like, playing the Browns, are not a very good offensive team, like you just mentioned, and you have a pretty solid defense that can hang with them. You had a solid run game too, and that's where, like, I think I agree with you too. You preface the coaching staff, like, I don't know, maybe probably don't lean on Carson Wentz as much, but also maybe have a more run heavy attack. Although they were pretty run heavy, Brian Robinson had 24 carries himself. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens with Washington. They got a lot of question marks going forward, and they may be one of these teams where in a couple years from now they're just gonna be bad, like real bad, because like I just don't see how they can get a franchise guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so.
I do want to add real quick too that the tough part for Carson Wentz as well is just the way, we talked about with Daniel Jones, the way that he ends this year could make him a lot of money. Obviously, the way that a lot of people remember Carson Wentz last year on the Colts is the collapse to the Jaguars. He didn't have the worst of games. It wasn't this game where he had 3 interceptions, but he only had 185 yards. He threw 1 touchdown, 1 pick, and they lost 26-11. So that's what people's memory of him is. And now the memory being added on is this current 3 interception game against the Browns. And both games were situations where at least the Jaguars one was winning in. This wasn't winning in, but it would absolutely give them a pretty massive advantage over, the Lions, the Packers, the Seahawks when it came to Week 18.
Yep, and unfortunately it didn't. And apparently, or maybe Ron Rivera didn't know, but who knows? Maybe he was being sarcastic.
But the way he asked that question of we can get eliminated today, I was like, you didn't know that? Like,
no trust.
You gotta. I mean, if you have a chance to get eliminated, you gotta fire your team up and say it's like this is do or die.
Well, maybe if he knew that, he would have started Taylor Heineke instead and said, "I should not place the fate of my hands in the hands of Carson Wentz."
That's a good point. Maybe that was. I don't know. That is. I hope that he knew it and was being sarcastic, because if he didn't, that's really bad.
Anyhow, let's go on to the next game. Almost an upset here too. But the San Francisco 49ers, they managed to survive against Las Vegas Raiders 37-34. Surprisingly, the Raiders, John, tore up this defense, and Jarrett Stidham yeah, I wasn't buying that maybe they would sell Derek Carr, but I can't help but maybe wonder now, definitely, if that is more of a possibility. Your thoughts on this game and the Raiders' offensive explosion here?
I don't know. I can't really explain the Raiders, to be honest. I mean, Devontae Adams, I can explain him. He's a beast. He's a freak. Josh Jacobs had a decent day. So those guys. But Jarrett Stidham, I mean, he did throw 2 interceptions, but 365 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. Like, it's more than I thought he would do. So I guess good for him. I can't explain it. I really don't. I don't know how. For the Niners, good for them to get the win. They took care of business, especially late in the game. They got the interception in overtime after missing their opportunity to clinch it out in regular time.
I thought like that was money for Gould in regulation. By the way, like I was watching at someone, I forgot whose house. I think it was one of my family's house, but I was using it as like, when that game ends, we can leave.
Right.
And it didn't end, so we couldn't leave.
Right.
So yeah.
I was actually rooting for the Raiders in this one. I was hoping the Niners would lose because theoretically, if the Eagles do lose next week and Dallas does win, the Niners actually hold the tiebreaker over the Cowboys. So if the Niners also win, the Niners would hold the first seed in the NFC. I think Dallas would move up to number 2 because I think they would hold the tiebreaker over Minnesota. But regardless, I was hoping that the Raiders would win because that would clear a path for Dallas to potentially get the 1 seed. But they did not. But regardless, the Niners won, so good for them. For their own motivations, that was huge because that clears a path for them to get the 1 seed if they can get a little help next week from the Giants. So we'll see. They also play the Cardinals next week, who are starting like their 4th quarterback. So the Niners are sitting pretty to end the year here.
Hey, don't respect David Blau like that. But anyway.
I didn't say it was bad. I mean, he is their 4th quarterback, though. McSorley, McCoy, Kyler, now him. But didn't he pull off a win for the Lions last year?
Yeah, he did.
So
I think either that or he. Yeah, I don't
go
remember,
Cardinals. Go David Blau.
Anyhow, I think it's important to remember in regards to Jarrett Stidham, having a really good performance is, he was with Josh McDaniels in New England. So this is probably a guy that Josh wanted to bring in and already kind of knows the system, knows what to look for and things like that. And, Darren Waller, another week healthier too. I think that's important to factor in. But yeah, like I said, I was on the side of, I don't think they're going to shop Derek Carr. I think they're just, packing it in for the year. But yeah, after seeing Jarrett Stidham ball out and, maybe kind of taking a step back, yeah, I started this with maybe buy more stock out the other way. But regardless, yeah, Devontae Adams had an amazing game. Unfortunately, not amazing enough as the Raiders fall short. Niners keep their number 1 seed hopes alive as, they need some help next week from the Giants you mentioned. So now let's go to the other New York team. Speaking of one of the New York teams, going to the Jets, where they went to Seattle, and the old Geno Smith revenge game, John. Him and the Seahawks beat the Jets 23-6, killed their playoff hopes. And for the Seahawks, keep theirs alive, obviously. Mike White couldn't save the Jets this time. John, any thoughts here between this game?
Seahawks just they dominated them in all regards. Geno Smith had a pretty decent day, 2 passing touchdowns, almost 200 yards in the air. Kenneth Walker ran for 133 yards, 5.8 yards per carry. The defense held Mike White in that offense to 6 points. They intercepted him 2 times. They recovered a fumble. Like they completely shut down the run game. They had Ty Johnson, who had some success, but overall, I think they had like 70 total rushing yards. So, yeah, I mean, the Seahawks, they came to play. Maybe unlike Washington, they knew it was do or die, and they showed up when it mattered. Unfortunately, I believe it eliminates the Jets. I'm not 100% sure of that, but I'm pretty sure I saw that somewhere. Regardless, Seattle, they now have a chance. They still need some help. But this was a really big win for them. Because, kind of like with Taylor Heineke, this is a year where they're just playing with house money. A lot of people, myself included, thought they'd be one of the worst teams in the league, and they're fighting for a playoff spot, which is pretty great.
Yeah, I was one of those people with you too. Like, I didn't think this would be a very good Seahawk team, and they kind of not kind of. I mean, need the Packers to lose if they win. So they don't really control their own destiny, but who, like you mentioned, who would have thunk that? And I do want to credit Geno Smith here too. Like, on a day where DK Metcalf was taken out of the equation, pretty much by Sauce Gardner, found ways to make plays to other guys, to Colby Parkinson and such. Guy in Laquan Treadwell, who's like on his probably fifth team, and no Tyler Lockett really as well. Kenneth Walker, it's good to see him get going, and they got him going as well. And I think it also goes to show how well coached Seattle is on the other side, because you mentioned forcing Mike White into some turnovers, some mistakes. So it seems like they were all over the tendencies, and maybe this will open the Jets fans' eyes to see, yes, Zach Wilson was part of the problem, but he wasn't the whole problem. Maybe you need to look into your passing game. I know Matt LaFleur is great, and I'm sure Mike LaFleur is a great guy, but who knows if he's, if his system is complex and adaptive enough for the NFL right now. And obviously, like I mentioned before, it'd be interesting to see what they go out and do at quarterback, because if Mike White's the guy, I'm not sure if he really is. Obviously, it's probably not going to, they're probably not bringing back Zach Wilson. They have a middling draft pick, so yeah, they got some decisions to make. Obviously, we'll see who's in the quarterback free agent market. That may help them out if someone, is out there. Don't think Tom Brady would, but Lamar Jackson, etc. But big win by the Seahawks. They keep their playoff hopes alive and keep moving against the Jets. Talk about keeping playoff hopes alive. Now we go to my game, where the Packers win this one against the Vikings, 41-17. Not looking like a great start, though. Opening punt for the Packers gets blocked, and the Vikings get the ball at the 3-yard line. The 3 is, and they only have to go 3 more yards for a touchdown, and they only get 3 points. And then it just seemed like an avalanche after that, because then Keyshawn Nixon returned to the kickoff, and Kirk Cousins made some mistakes. Any thoughts on this game, John?
Well, watching this, when the punt got blocked, I was like, "Oh no!" Because the special teams.
I said sorry.
I was just going to say the special teams has been the bane of the Packers' existence for the last probably 3 years, maybe longer. I don't know. But yeah, that's been even back to last year in the playoffs against the Niners. The really poor special teams performances is kind of what cost them. Obviously, it's not entirely to blame. Everybody plays a part, but the special teams, they've been one of the worst special teams units for years. This year, they're not. I don't know where they rank, but they're not the worst. But then when that happened, I was like, oh no. But then they got the stop, and when they got the stop, I said, all right, the defense has come to play. I think Aaron Rodgers and the offense is going to come to play. And then the Nixon return happens, and I was like, the special teams has come to play. The Packers are going to run away with this, and that's exactly what they did. Once I saw the special teams back, they're on board, and it wasn't going to be rough all day, I knew it. I felt like, man, the Packers, they're getting that late season surge. I've seen Aaron Rodgers do this too many times, and the Vikings, once again, I don't want to call them a fraud, but they are a 12-4 team with a negative point differential, which is very similar to a team like the Jets, who are 7-9. And so a 12-4 team, let me look at their exact point differential. They're a 12-4 team, and their point differential is negative 19. To put that in perspective, the Saints, who are 7-9, have a better point differential at negative 12. The Raiders at 6-10 have a better point differential at negative 5. The Browns at 7-9 have a better point differential at negative 6. The Dolphins and the Jets also have better point differentials with worse records. So basically, the point differential would tell you that the Vikings truly are actually about a 500 team, maybe a little below. But they're 12-4, and that's because they're winning a lot of one-score games, but when they lose, they get blown out. And that doesn't bode well for them going into the playoffs, and this is just kind of a disastrous loss because this obviously hurts. I think it basically kills their chances for the 1 seed, because I don't think they would have the tiebreaker, obviously, over Dallas if Philly was to lose. And then if Philly wins, there you go. And then if hypothetically Philly and Dallas lose, the Niners are still there, and the Niners would have the tiebreaker. So they need all 3 of them to lose to get the 1st seed, but most likely they're going to be the 3rd seed. So tough loss for the Vikings. And, we could potentially be seeing them matching up with Green Bay later in the playoffs. I don't know. That's all I'm saying is, we'll see. But regardless, just a really bad loss for Minnesota, and for Green Bay, this is the momentum that you needed going into that Lions week.
Yeah. So I thought I sent a better emoji. I didn't. I just sent the melting face emoji whenever the punt got blocked. Cause I was like, yeah, here we go again. It is typical Green Bay. We're going to be down 21-0 before we can even blink. But yeah, I was a little surprised the Vikings didn't just try to run the ball, like all 3 downs, just pound it in. I feel like they would have done that under Mike Zimmer. It probably would have worked. But yeah, credit the Packers defense. That's always a tough situation. Is, you sit down, you're just in there resting and, maybe getting ready, but then, punt blocked. We thought we had 70 yards to play with. Now we have 3 yards to hold them out on, and they did a great job there. And yeah, I saw a funny tweet in regards to Keyshawn Nixon, because he's been having some pretty good run backs recently. Like, definitely for Packer fans. I thought for a while, it was just me being a Packer fan. I was like, man, like, we're actually kind of returning some kicks for some good yardage here.
On the broadcast, they said that, like, I don't know what the exact stat was, but they said that he's been statistically the best return man in the league this year.
Yeah, and he's only played. And here's the thing: I saw this tweet where it's like, whoever thought it was a good idea to have Amari Rodgers returning kicks for us for the first half of the season needs to be let go. Because that's who was returning kicks for him instead.
Unless that was the same guy who then let Keyshawn Nixon do it. Then,
put him up. Yeah. And I think it's apparently too, like he's like never returned kicks to like his entire career. I think really I heard that somewhere. I want to. So, like, yeah, like, talk about just a natural feel. But, yeah, that was a huge Kickstarter. And I was more impressed just the fact that we took away Justin Jefferson. My ball of the week is going to be Jair. I know he didn't truly live on an island, but he was put in some tough spots and obviously had some safety help. But they had a good field. The Packers, I feel like, for some of their tendencies. And it's just something that we never do, too, really. I feel like we don't do enough. Is, hey, let's double the other team's best receiver. Like we saw week 1. We've seen it all year, really, with Kirk Cousins, and this offense let's just force feed Justin Jefferson. Good things are bound to happen. And then, maybe if teams do double or there's a player he's taken away, you go to Hawkinson. But I like that the Packers were consistent with it the entire game. Let KJ Osborne and TJ Hawkinson beat you, and Kirk, they weren't able to do so. Had some, obviously, some key turnovers that helped the Packers. Obviously, the pick 6 was also huge as well. That was wild. And shout out to Darnell Savage, even though he's not even a starter. So that's crazy. But not he's a starter. But anyway, not gonna say the offense is fixed, but it's one of those days where I'm not going to criticize the offense. They didn't have to do much since the defense was able to do a lot. So yeah, I have a little bit of hope. John, you've given me a little bit of hope. And, I don't want... Okay, I'll say it because in case I am wrong, but, we did win the Super Bowl when we were the lowest seed, and, we went in and had an unimpressive defense.
I don't need this, because if y'all were to win the Super Bowl, I have to imagine that Dallas loses again somehow to Green Bay.
And,
I don't know.
I mean, we have a terrible home record in recent years too at Lambeau, so one easy way to avoid that is just not play at home.
See, now if that happens, that means the Eagles will choke the 1st seed, Cowboys will get it, and then Green Bay will win their wild card game, play Dallas in Dallas, and then I'm going to have another nightmare moment. That's the only way Green Bay win. If that happens, Green Bay will win the Super Bowl, and I will accept that.
All right, well, we'll have to remember this, clip it in case it happens. But anyway, Jair Alexander, my ball of the week. I mean, I know he didn't have an interception or whatever, but all over Justin Jefferson. He even graded in front of him. Like, I was just scared as a Packer fan. Usually, when someone talks trash, we get blown out.
He did that early too. That was like the first drive he greeted on him. And I was like,
I actually thought
"Sheesh."
he was gonna get a flag for that because he just like straight like I know he agreed away from him, but technically he celebrated like right above him.
I thought,
So,
yeah, I thought he'd get a flag, but I also thought like, oh, Justin Jefferson's got to take that personally, and they're gonna just dice him up. And
they're gonna dial him
did
up
it
like
all.
a good rub route or something.
Yeah, he held his own all game. He locked him up.
So credit Green Bay defense, but especially Jair for talking his trash, handling the assignment, and wearing that big cap afterwards. If we win the Super Bowl, I will get me a big cap. But until then, that will not happen. Anyway, big one for my Packers. They stay alive in the playoff race. Now let we go over to two teams whose fates were already decided, but it was a personal battle. The battle for LA, and the LA Chargers seemed to won this one as they win 31-10. Not too surprising, as you know, the Rams, we know their Super Bowl hangover is real, and Chargers, although maybe not much to play for since they already locked the playoffs, obviously want to stay in rhythm. Any thoughts here in regards to the Chargers winning this one, John?
Not really for the Rams. Once again, there wasn't much to play for. Another team playing with house money. If you play well, that's great, but you don't even have really like reasons to lose for draft picks. Good to see Cam Akers back. I actually did not expect him to have this late surge, but for a guy who was away from the team and people thought he might get cut or traded and all that stuff, he's really started to show up this last month and had a really solid end of the season, which I think Rams fans are pretty excited about. And then on the Chargers side, I mean, it's just nice to see them, getting more healthy again. Mike Williams and Keenan Allen there. Joey Bosa played, which is cool. And so they're getting healthy at the right time. And I know they're a wild card team, but I feel like the Chargers they might be one of those teams that there's just a lot of people who might not want to play them right now because Justin Herbert, Austin Eckler, you got those two great receivers that are finally back healthy. The defense is getting healthy again. And also the Chargers defense, I think outside of last week, like not this game against the Rams, but the week before when they play, or no, the Colts, they actually locked them up too. What week was it? It was, I guess, against the Titans. I don't know. The defense has really been balling out. Like the most points they've allowed over the last month was against the Dolphins when they allowed 17.
They still won that game.
Yeah, and they still won that game. So the Chargers are on a bit of a hot streak ever since that Raiders loss December 4th, and they've been looking really good.
Yeah.
And sorry, real quick, I do want to say too, people put some respect on Brandon Staley's name because there's been a lot of talk about him getting fired, even though I thought he was pretty good last year, and now they've made a playoff spot, like his second year as the head coach. They almost made it last year with his first year. I don't know. I thought I felt like the Brandon Staley stuff was just a little ridiculous because he's a newer head coach, and anyway, they're looking good. And his side of the ball too, the defense, which I've been very critical of, that's what's been shown up.
Yes, yeah, even when I've been critical of him about some of his fourth down decisions, I think for him to be on the hot seat is ridiculous because they've done a lot of good things, especially it helps when you have number 10 out there as in Justin Herbert, as he just continues to kind of be a machine. Good to see the run game get going too for the Chargers. Something that really hasn't been going for them. And I clear most of us on that big run, even Joshua Kelly 9 for 45. So finding ways to move the ball that way, maybe that'll lead to more explosive plays come playoff time. And then, for the Rams, not too much of a shock. Be very interested to see what happens with Cam Akers. Like I said, maybe I'm still not going to eliminate the possibility that maybe they're just trying to boost his value to trade him for some sort of compensation in the offseason, although it is it's hard to gauge value on a running back, especially running back that's already had a few years and a very scary Achilles injury. So probably more likely that they're just trying to build up his confidence, and obviously he's been playing really well. So maybe they're just hoping that this leads over to next season when they get the rest of the crew back and some reinforcements. So big one for the Chargers as they keep rolling and just building that confidence going into the playoffs. But now we go to the Sunday night game, and this one was as advertised, a classic AFC North Steelers Ravens type. 16-13, the Steelers win this one. Mike Tomlin 500 dream is very much real, and heck, the playoffs are very real for the Steelers, despite my criticism of them throughout the year. I called their O-line basically hot trash at the beginning of the year, and they were, but I shouldn't have bet against Mike Tomlin and the gang, because man, he's got them wheeling and dealing here. John, any thoughts in regards to the Steelers quietly making a surge here into the playoffs?
I don't know how Mike Tomlin does it. I really don't. I mean, this guy somehow every year, like even this year, they started off so bad, and all of a sudden they're making this late push, and they're in the playoff conversation. Like they legitimately, going into this last week, have a chance to make the playoffs, which is crazy. I don't know. Even if they can't get the 500, 8-9, with the way that the outlook was, really impressive. So yeah, I mean, usually I feel like NFL fans kind of hate when these games are super low scoring, but when you got the Steelers Ravens, you just kind of know it's going to be, and you know it's going to be brutal, and you know it's going to get a little feisty, a little chippy, and people are going to get mad at each other. Cam Hayward did it early in the game, and you know that things are just, you know, it's going to be some good old AFC North rivalry football out in the cold, and that's what happened. The Steelers, they rallied late. Big shout outs to Kenny Pickett, because I feel like the way that he started the season when he first got the starting job was really rough. He was turning the ball over a lot. It just felt like he was not really in the groove and like ready for the NFL speed, but I think he's adjusted well. He's not turning the ball over as much anymore. Like, I mean, even this game, 0 interceptions. They didn't lose a fumble. So like, you know, they maintained the ball. They relied on the run game too. That helps. The Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris were doing really well. But Kenny Pickett leading that drive late to, you know, take the touchdown and get the win there. So, yeah, big stuff from the Steelers to keep it alive. For the Ravens, that's kind of a tough one because it hurts their division chances. But you know, we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I have not much else to add in regards to complimentary things towards Mike Tomlin. The only thing I want to add is, Steelers fans, if you ever think about firing him again, like, maybe think again, because like you definitely said on the pod before, like the day he gets fired, like if he does get fired, he's gonna have other teams will be calling him immediately.
He will get hired that same day. Like, unless he wants to take time, every team that needs a head coach will call him instantly. Probably even some teams that don't need one will call him and just gauge the interest. Like, hey, if you come here, we'll fire our current guy because I mean, he's got a Super Bowl on his resume, and he's a beast.
Oh, we know he keeps a very good culture and just knows how to build good, tough teams. Like this year is a prime example of that. Lose TJ Watt early in the year. They were 2-6 and basically dead in the water, and even, you know, lost Kenny Pickett for a couple of weeks there. Had to throw in Trubisky, still stayed afloat, and then, you know, Pickett came back and they still eased him back in, and even lost Minka Fitzpatrick for a week or two. And Najee Harris didn't get going at all really until these last 2 weeks. So yeah, I mean, Pittsburgh, in typical Pittsburgh fashion, man, just finding ways to, you know, make games tough and gritty, and, you know, just minimizing their mistakes on the offensive side of the ball. And in regards to Baltimore, I mean, find Lamar Jackson. I'm definitely sending a few gifts of Brinks trucks to the Baltimore front office, because I think his value is pretty much going up and up and up, you know, as time is going on here. So him holding out may work out in his favor, at least monetarily, whether it be with the Ravens or not going forward. Because, yeah, as solid as Tyler Huntley is, this team is just not the same especially explosiveness and explosive-wise, better phrase, especially in the pass game, but also in the run game. I mean, really, it's just J.K. Dobbins, but that's about it. So, Baltimore, though, still, I believe they still have a playoff chance. Let me look at the bracket, right? Yeah, they're locked in. They're 10-6. I forget they're locked in.
The tough part is we don't know what's going to happen with this Bengals-Bills situation. And so it does. The team that gets hurt the most is actually Baltimore, because they could have won the division had the Bengals lost the Bills and then they beat them. But now,
and then they would have home field at least first week of the playoffs. Right,
but now we're not totally sure.
Understood. So, yeah, we'll see what happens there. But Ravens still locked for the playoffs, so we'll see if maybe they rest Lamar another week, or if maybe they decide to play him a bit. Who knows what the plan will be for them. But that is it. That is the Week 17 reactions for John and myself and our ballers of the week. We will be back. No Thursday night game. I believe our game's Saturday, though, I guess, right? So we'll definitely be back later in the week before Saturday to provide you our picks against the spread. I'll say in regards to that was a tough week for John. And then also I got my 2 locks. So I mean, unless you hit an absolute, I'm sure you're going to try.
It's time
unless
to
you
put
got
it
you hit
all
a
on the
banger.
line next week, baby.
8 locks. 8 locks next week for John. And hey, I mean, it may be easy because maybe you get clarity on what teams are going to rest or not. I don't know though. Probably not though.
The tough part is you picking locks
Honestly,
as well. Like if you're taking some,
Yeah.
then yeah. Anyway, but I'm gonna go as many as I possibly can at that point. Just see if I can get a really good week.
Maybe all you need is one. Maybe you just need one hand to hit. Sometimes you go to Vegas, you just need the one hand, the one big pot.
Shove it all in and see what happens, baby.
But not he didn't get too far behind in the picks. Only 3 games, so he's to be made up. And yeah, who knows? Maybe John summons his Tom Brady and just comes alive in the fourth quarter, the very last minute, and balls out. But anyhow, we'll be back later to do those picks and reactions. As per usual, if you can like, comment, subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, getting closer and closer to 1,000 subs there. And then also if you're listening on any podcast mediums, rate, comment, and such there as well. And then our main social is at Shut Up and Ball Pod on Insta and at Shut Up and Ball on Twitter and TikTok. Other than that, we will see you all later in the week. Adios.